Well, welcome everyone to our July broker manager meeting. We're so excited you're here and look forward to sharing all kinds of exciting updates with you today. We wanted to start with a semi-update on our Texas Realtor Conference. We know it will be 100% virtual. And the links are available on our texasrealestate.com website under the Realtors tab. So please watch for further updates and information and get registered for our conference. This is going to be a really unique opportunity to be able to not travel, free conference, 100% free conference, excellent world-renowned speakers. We were talking a bit ago, Nancy noticed we have a comedy act, I guess, from Sinbad, the comedian on the menu, 5K race for healthy folks like Nancy. And we hope you can find lots to enjoy there. Probably a real major highlight, as well as all the CE at the Texas Realtor Conference this fall will be included free of charge as well. We've heard there'll be as many as 1,000 attendees allowed in some of the classes. However, certainly registration is going to be limited, and with it being free and lots of hungry realtors ready to learn, you do want to register early and pick and choose the best options for you. So we look forward to you enjoying the Texas Realtor Conference free of charge, again, including all the CE. So we'll see you there. We got an update as well from NAR overnight that had some really bright information we wanted to share with you, starting with our existing home sales in June. Skyrocketed up almost 21% in growth after 3 straight months of decline nationwide, of course. We, as typical, hadn't suffered as much in our area. However, seeing that almost 21% climb in June for existing sales certainly puts a light at the end of this crazy tunnel we're in, and excited to see that. So thanks to all of you working hard through all the craziness, and I know adding some major positives to those statistics. We also have, of course, our senators and Congress folks working at the White House on a possible next round of coronavirus relief. So NAR, of course, has sent leaders in to help and provide us with a comprehensive letter. They have made proposals to the Congress, and hopefully we'll have a positive outcome from those meetings. So watch for more on that. NAR also has their leadership summit coming up August 17th through the 19th, where our National Association of Realtors President Charlie Oppler and his leadership team will present priorities for the upcoming year. And registration for all the programs will open the first week of August. So again, not knowing the capacity of the classrooms and so forth, you'll want to mark your schedule for the first week in August to jump on NAR's website and look for the Leadership Summit information. I'm sure we'll receive emails and updates as well as we progress. Then I'm confident, we've talked about this several times, but just wanted to remind you any topics or information that come up, questions, concerns regarding COVID-19 coronavirus. We're always coached to be the source of information, not necessarily the information itself. So again, keep watching. We have wonderful special forms from our Texas Realtors that allow us to somewhat pre-screen information from people. The notification form, I guess I'll call it, asking if anyone, whether they're selling their house or property or wanting to view a property, we can send a form that asks, have you been sick, had symptoms, been around anyone tested positive with COVID-19 in the last 2 weeks, and have them sign off on that document as somewhat of an affidavit. That's very helpful. And some other forms and resources, even commercial forms for us there through our Texas Realtors. And always remember, our primary source that we want to be providing to folks is our cdc.gov/coronavirus. And that's a quick summary of what we received in from NAR today. And it is my pleasure to introduce, we have 2 esteemed guest speakers today, and we will start with Miss Kinsky Moss. She wants to talk to us, or has agreed to talk to us, I should say, about MLS, clear cooperation, and our coming soon policies. Please help me welcome Kinsky.
I was going to see if Kelly could start first, just because my presentation will take longer, and that way we can focus more on questions. Does anyone have any objections to that?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Let's move on. Then we'll circle right back. We'll start with Kelly Flanagan with Texas Realtors, and she's going to talk to us about teams and our broker responsibilities. Thank you, Kelly.
Super, thank you, and good morning, everybody. I've just put a couple slides together. It's on 2 kind of legal hot topics that people we hear questions on from time to time. So just hoping to provide highlight some clarity on these 2 issues. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. And can you all see that okay? Is that working out? Okay, so the first slide that I have here, it's about the broker responsibility course. I understand that there might have been some questions about a supervisor and what obligations they have to take the broker responsibility course. I can confirm it's not just for brokers. Delegated supervisors of 1 or more license holders for 6 months or more during their current license period need to take the 6-hour broker responsibility course as part of their continuing education to renew their license. And as background to this, any license holder who leads or supervises, directs, or manages a team needs to be delegated as a supervisor. The trigger to notify TREC is if it's for 3 months or 3 consecutive months or more. If it has been or is expected to last that long, that's when you notify TREC that this individual is a delegated supervisor. And there's also a paired obligation when they are no longer a supervisor to notify TREC. So the timelines are just something to note. There's a different timeline. So they get designated right away, are delegated right away within the brokerage if they're doing any of these things. The TREC notification, it's a 3-month trigger, and the continuing education trigger for broker responsibility course, it's a 6-month. So those are the obligations, and I'm glad to answer any questions on that. And if not, I will move on to the second hot topic. Listing agreements. We get a lot of questions on the hotline about what happens to a listing agreement when an agent changes brokers. And so these first 2, just at the top of this slide, who are the parties to the listing agreement? Is the sales agent a party to the listing agreement? Just understanding the legal relationship established by a listing agreement, it is between the seller and the broker. The sales agent is not a party. The broker is representing the seller, and the sales agent just acts as an agent of the broker. So Under our listing agreement, our residential listing agreement, the listing wouldn't end because a sales agent changes brokers. The termination that the parties agreed to, the term of the listing, would still apply unless one of two situations occurred. And that would be if the seller and the broker agreed to terminate the listing early, and either party could not want to do that, and that would be fine, and it would just default to the terms of the listing agreement, the end date in paragraph 4A. Or the broker assigns the listing to another broker after getting the seller's written consent for assignment. The listing agreement states, this is from the end of the listing agreement, where it says that this contract can only be assigned with the written consent of the other party. So that's another possible way that a listing may change between brokers. But unless one of those two situations applies, it does remain with the agent who left their original sponsoring broker that entered the agreement with the seller. And so if a sales agent does leave during the listing, the broker is going to want to designate someone else to work with the seller to complete the transaction. And that concludes my two topics. If anyone has any questions on those.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Kelly?
And I can add, I just wanted to mention something regarding what Kelly said, because I know we've received the question about the MLS has its own transfer forms. Definitely use those if your MLS requires them, but you want to make sure that you're also complying with the legal aspect, which Kelly just mentioned, because you don't want just an agent transferring the listing using the MLS form. You want to make sure it's done correctly through the broker, as Kelly mentioned. So that issue does come up a lot. So in addition to using the transfer forms that you may be obligated to use in the MLS, make sure it's done correctly, legally, using the listing agreements or termination forms.
Great point, great point. And ladies, are we going to be able to, or may I ask so I don't forget, to get copies of your slides?
Absolutely, I'll get them to Nancy.
Thank you so much, Kelly. We appreciate you being here, and we'll circle back with any further questions. And thanks for helping keep us out of trouble.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, let's move to Miss Kinski Moss, if you'll help enlighten us as well.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, perfect. So the only reason we wanted Kelly to start is because we think this topic is definitely going to cause lots of questions. So I did want to start off by asking, how is it going so far with Netris implementing the policy? Because it's already been a few months. So just kind of wanted to get your input on how clear cooperation is going within the MLS right now.
Do you want me to take that, Rebecca? Okay.
Yes, please.
So basically, we are in an education mode right now through the end of this year. So we are educating our members, and Netris has their spot there, but we've allotted for a broad band of education in light of all that's going on. So
okay, good. So no issues so far. I know when the policy was first discussed, it did raise a lot of questions and issues. We're still getting lots of questions and issues for those MLSs that are already in enforcement mode. So I've tried to break down the policy in its simplest form. So feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation as they come up, but let's go ahead and get started. So you'll hear me talk about MLS Policy Statement 8.0, also known as the Clear Cooperation Policy. So those phrases will be used interchangeably throughout the presentation. So let's answer 3 questions, again, to simplify it. What is the Clear Cooperation Policy? Why was it implemented? And then when, which we know May 1st was that local implementation. So what is clear cooperation? In its simplest form, the policy requires listing brokers to submit a listing to the MLS within 1 business day of marketing the property to the public. So that seems pretty simple, just reading that. But just to give you some background information, we'll kind of talk about why. So as you already know, this policy was adopted back in November of 2019 by NAR. It went through several stages. And I did want to mention that, again, I'm not the person that proposed this policy, but I am going to explain it to you. There were several instances where members, associations, MLSs could have provided, and I think my doorbell might ring, so I apologize for that. But there were several instances where feedback could have been provided during the NAR MLS committee meeting, their forum. They also asked for input, but nevertheless, the policy passed overwhelmingly with 91% approval. So, that just shows that the policy was definitely, it may have not turned out what everybody wanted it to be, but there was definitely a majority approval for this policy. And, just going through the policy itself, it was originally 24 hours, but they felt that they needed to clarify that, so they added it as 1 business day. So you all know, working with Trek contracts, business days versus calendar days, so not too far off from that. Basically, business day is going to exclude the weekends and holidays. So that's simple enough. Now, the second component of the rule is marketing to the public. What does that mean? Well, that is actually pretty broad. If you look at the screen, you can see that that pretty much includes anything from a flyer, a sign, discussing the listing information with someone outside of the brokerage. So if you recall Trek's definition of advertising, again, it's pretty broad, so same here, and we'll get into that in more detail later. So, and you can see I put pretty much everything is considered marketing to the public outside of the brokerage. So we talked a little bit about why. Generally to encourage cooperation among brokerages and address the problems surrounding off-market listings that never make it into the MLS. Then you don't have all that data in the MLS. And we all know that in Texas, with it being a non-disclosure state, we do have some issues with that where the seller does not want the property in the MLS because they don't want the sales price shared. So that may be a common concern in Texas. Now, when we all know that it went into effect May 1st, some MLSs may have implemented it sooner. So I know that many of you may be participants of more than one MLS. You need to check each MLS for their rules on whether listings that were taken prior to May 1st, whether clear cooperation applies to them or not. That's the unfortunate thing, is you'll have to check with each MLS on when that was implemented, and then enforcement as well when that took place. So let's look at a simple example, just kind of, again, breaking down the rule. You have a listing broker who takes a listing on a Friday, so today. When must the listing broker submit the listing to the MLS under the clear cooperation policy? Now, we have to go back to the rule. Have all components been triggered? So remember, it has to be submitted within 1 business day of it being publicly marketed. So in this example, I didn't make it clear. It hasn't been publicly marketed. So then, if no, then you have to look at whichever occurs first. The mandatory submission rule versus 8.0. So 8.0 has not been triggered yet because it has not been publicly marketed. Let's go to the mandatory submission rule. So all MLSs already have this rule in place, but now it will coincide with the clear cooperation rule. And Tim, I might call on you to tell me what Netrus's rule says about submitting it into the MLS generally once you have all authorized signatures from the seller. It could be anywhere. I know some have 24 hours, some have 2 days, up to 5 days. And you know what Netrus's rule is, and you all probably have that memorized.
72 hours.
Okay, so 72 hours. So this mandatory submission rule is generally at the beginning, section 1 of the rules, which states that once you do have all those necessary signatures on the listing agreement from the sellers, you have to submit the listing to the MLS within 72 hours. So clear cooperation and the mandatory submission rule may come into play, and one may override the other one depending on what happens first. So let's go to the second example. Here we have a listing broker that's going to take a listing on Sunday and publicly markets it on Sunday. Let's say the mandatory submission rule is, I think you said 72 hours for Netris. When must the listing broker submit the listing to the MLS under 8.0? So again, we're going to look back at the trigger. Which one's going to occur first? Was it marketed to the public? And in this example, we're saying yes, it did on Sunday. So 8.8 can actually require the listing to be submitted to the MLS prior to that mandatory submission rule. So in here, that 1 business day would be that Monday. Just keep those 2 rules in mind. You may be used to that mandatory submission rule, but 8.0 can actually require the listing to be submitted earlier than that. Now let's talk about exempt listings office exclusive policy. This is another rule that's already been in place prior to clear cooperation, but now it could be affected by clear cooperation. Feel free to tell me to slow down, or if you have any questions, but I have some prompted questions after the presentation. So if you have a seller, which this oftentimes happens in Texas because sellers do not want the property shared in the MLS for privacy reasons, or it could include, they just don't want the sales price disclosed. So if you do have a seller in that instance that does not want the listing to be shared with other participants, you can use the office exclusive policy. Now keep in mind though, and we'll get into kind of defining what that actually means, the office exclusive part, that even though you file it as an office exclusive, the second that it is publicly marketed, that changes it. And you'll see, I think it's note 2, that says the clear cooperation policy is going to kick in because it's been publicly marketed or shared outside of that office exclusive. And then you will have to comply with the clear cooperation policy. So let's talk about what does office exclusive actually mean. So we did go back to NAR. We've actually gone back to NAR several times on a lot of components of the clear cooperation policy to clarify. Just because the rule or the policy as written was not as clear. And I do want to mention that you can check NAR's FAQ section on clear cooperation, as well as TexasRealEstate.com. We have a clear cooperation policy section that goes through some of the detailed questions we asked NAR to clarify. So this was one of them, and this is on our website. Office exclusive. We went back and forth asking whether this is going to include the MLS office ID, whether it's going to include a franchise. So what NAR did say is that it's going to be specific to the regulatory laws in the state. So then we have to look at TREC rules. So according to TREC rules, it's going to come down to the sponsoring broker. So what that means is that if you take an office exclusive, it's going to be limited to that sponsoring broker, the broker and the agents within that office. Anything outside of that sponsoring broker is going to trigger 8.0 and be considered public marketing. So you have to take a look at that. Some opponents of the policy mentioned that it's going to favor larger brokerages where you have a sponsoring broker with several agents under that office. That is the case. But keep in mind, it's not going to extend to a franchise. You have to look back at the TREC rules. Who is that sponsoring broker? And who are the agents or broker associates under that brokerage for that sponsoring broker? Anything outside of that, again, is going to be considered public marketing and would trigger the clear cooperation policy. Any questions on that? Yes, Rebecca.
I'll jump in there. So one of the issues I stumbled upon, like you said, trying to internalize and operationalize and get everybody else trained up, is this has caused, in my opinion, and I've requested from TREC and would love any help and support possible, is the broker associates, right? Currently, our broker associates are not technically tied to us under our regulator, right? If you look at structure, we have an agreement, so they are broker associates of our firm. However, per the regulator, they're individual brokers, and we are marketing outside of my broker sponsorships, even when I tell my own broker associates legally at this point, kind of the way the structure is. So I've kind of or I have clearly asked for many years that broker associates be tied to the actual designated broker for each firm under TREC for reasons such as this, right? And in the past, it was just consumers searching for the head of the pack to yell at, right? And get to the insurance or whatever they're trying to get to. So the consumers don't have the ability. And now with this, even marketing just inside my total firm, I'm marketing outside my firm legally.
And it's been, I will apologize, I am no longer part of the legal department, so I'm rusty on my legal skills, but Kelly Flanagan can definitely jump in. But yes, that is a good point to bring up, that broker associates can operate under TREC rules just like a broker and are not sponsored. Keep in mind, sponsoring broker can also mean a brokerage firm. So it could be an individual broker versus a brokerage firm. But that's a good point to make, that the broker associates would be essentially independent of that sponsoring broker, because they can do anything a broker can do per TREC rules. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yeah, that's correct. I can see how it does cause some confusion with regard to 8.0. I don't know if NAR has said anything with regard to that, but I would expect that 8.0 was intended to be limited to the associates brokers work for that broker that they're associated with, that it wouldn't give them a link to disseminate it outside of that business operation.
Right, and keep in mind, TREC and NAR aren't necessarily working together. They're two separate organizations. TREC will reach out to us to kind of just make sure their regulations are staying up to date with the industry. So we can definitely pass that issue along. But yeah, that is a good point to make regarding the broker associate issue. Any more questions on the office exclusive and what that means?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, can y'all hear me? My internet's pretty unstable.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Just a point of clarification. So there's a lot of brokerages, especially kind of away from the DFW area. They may be ranch brokers. They may do, as long as that brokerage is not a member of an MLS system, they can still practice brokerage and advertise their properties without violating this policy, correct?
And let me make sure I understood the question correctly. If they're not a participant of the MLS, then the MLS rules would not necessarily apply to them.
Right,
right. We can get into.
Yeah, okay. So this is only an MLS deal, not a.
Correct.
Okay.
And we can get into, we have a question on the screen. Does it apply to commercial property types or farm and ranch property types? And the answer to that is that NAR initially created this policy to apply to single-family residential properties. However, it doesn't mean that a local MLS can't apply this to other property types. So again, if you're a member or participant of multiple MLSs, you will need to check the rules of each MLS to ensure compliance, because some MLSs may have applied it to other property types such as commercial and farm and ranch. So that could create some issues for those of you who are participants of multiple MLSs trying to keep up with the multiple set of rules.
Nancy, Tim, has Netris defined these rules to apply to farm and ranch and commercial?
Just single-family residence.
Only single-family residential? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. That's good to know.
May I jump in? I'm not sure who may have been at NAR when this was passed, and there was lots of debate on the topic. And certainly when we came back and shared with the members, the farm and ranch category was added as being applicable here. Unless something changed after the fact. So commercial was left on the sidelines to be interpreted by the MLSs. And I don't know if, Nancy, if you recall us kind of digging up those minutes and notes and the trickle down paperwork we shared with everyone, but I just remember working closely with Dan Hatfield and his frustrations trying to get farm and ranch excluded. And
We have spoken to Dan Hatfield specifically about this issue. And we did reach out to NAR to get this in writing, because I think there was a lot of confusion as to whether it did apply or not. So we do have confirmation from NAR that the policy itself as written does not include farm and ranch. It will just be up to the local MLS to include it or not. So we did clarify that, and we have a statement in writing from NAR as to farm and ranch.
excellent. Yay. Well, we didn't even get that far in the meeting. So we need to look, Mark, just to be safe, at our local Netris. And we'll work on that.
That's a big question. And how does NAR define farm and ranch?
They leave it up to the local MLS to define it.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind,
over 5 acres, I don't know.
yeah, keep in mind when you look at, I believe it's section 1 of the MLS rules. Again, it could be different in Netris's rules. It does list property types, and farm and ranch is in there. But again, we asked NAR for clarification whether the 8.0 policy would apply to farm and ranch when the section 1 does include farm and ranch, and they said no. Again, they are always looking for input, so 8.0 could be adapted to apply to farm and ranch in the future. So just, keep that in mind. They won't meet again until November, so that could come up. But as of today, it does not apply to farm and ranch property types.
Can I thank you very much. Can I ask a second clarifying question? And this is not regarding that. On our listing agreement, so the rule is once the listing agreement is signed by all parties, you've got the time frame by which to get it up, at least is coming soon, but up on the MLS. Our listing agreements also have kind of a delay mechanism that, for example, we could sign a listing agreement but check a box that the seller does not want the listing up on the MLS for, say, 10 days due to the reason of make ready, for example.
Right.
So as long as we sign the listing agreement, we check that box that they want it delayed, and we are not, nobody is marketing it. It's just getting the house ready, helping them clean it up, whatever. There's no marketing being done. We're still okay within those rules, right?
Correct. And I put the screenshot of the new listing agreement. And again, just to give you some background information.
Yeah. Okay.
Anytime we update these forms, we do it with a task force. We don't do it on our own. And Tim actually, being a representative of Netris and a broker, was on that task force. So we did try to make these changes that would benefit the majority. Of course, they don't address every situation. But if you see the red line change, we did put that big note up at top, just to let you know that you may have checked these boxes, but once it's publicly marketed, 8.0 could be triggered. And you were referencing 6A-B.
Yes.
So again, we do recommend we have another note, do not check if prohibited by your MLS. So from my understanding, Netris does have a coming soon status, is that correct? So you would be able to check this. And yes, you would be able to use that section of the listing agreement. And then I'm not familiar with how Netris treats the coming soon because NAR did leave the coming soon status up to each MLS on how to address it. So just make sure you're in compliance with Netris's, you know, if it's 15 days, I don't know how many days it is.
It's 30.
30. So make sure you're complying with Netris's rule as well.
It was updated to 30 days, and we did put the caveat in no showings during the 30 days, which was not in there previously.
Okay, good to know.
So just to be clear, if you check 6A-B and you put 10 days in there and you sign the listing agreement, you still have to have it as coming soon within a business day?
So that's going to completely default to what Netris's coming soon rule is, which apparently allows you to do it for 30 days with no showings. And so going back to kind of the intent of clear cooperation, all it was trying to do was to make sure that the listings are in the MLS. So with the coming soon status, that complies with it.
Yeah, when they're ready for market. I mean, really, when they're truly ready to market it.
So the coming soon status that Netris has adopted complies with 8.0. So once you check that, then you just need a.
Sometimes if you're needing 10 or 14 days to get a house ready, you know, you may not even have the photography done.
Right.
It's not even practical to sign a listing agreement and then say, oh, we're ready to go in one day.
Right.
I mean, in reality, you sign a listing agreement. For example, we provide free of charge a home stager, you know, but I don't want to be paying for her out of my own pocket if I don't have a listing agreement signed.
Right.
But it's very frequent that we'll do 10 or 14 days or 7 days, whatever the client wants. But I want them to make sure they're committed to us before we start spending real money.
Exactly.
But, you know, the second it's signed, even if we're not marketing it, I have a small brokerage, so we don't have a lot of brokers to, you know, market internally to. So that's not even the intent. But so I want to be clear on 6A-B. If that box is checked and it says 10 days in there, once we sign that, even though we said.
Sorry, I think you cut out.
Isn't ready for anything. Oh.
Yeah, you're in compliance. If you check 6A-B, because of Netris's coming soon rule, you're in compliance with the MLS rules and clear cooperation policy. But that's Netris. If you're a participant of another MLS, you're going to have to see if they have a coming soon status.
My question was, if you check 6A-B and let's say you fill in 10 days, does it have to be coming soon still the next business day?
And that's going to depend on Netris's, how they define coming soon. Tim, I don't know if you have that rule memorized. So that I can't answer just because the coming soon part, and just to clarify, the coming soon part was not defined by NAR. That's completely up to, all NAR wanted the MLSs to do was adopt the policy itself that it must be submitted to the MLS. The coming soon part, NAR said, if your MLS has adopted coming soon, that's going to comply with clear cooperation, but it's up to the MLS how they treat that coming soon. So I don't know what the coming soon status in Netris says regarding keeping it, you know, in the coming soon status versus when it has to go active. It sounds like if you show it, you have to change it to going active. But otherwise, you would have 30 days to keep it in that coming soon status, from my understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Rebecca,
I guess I'm not asking the question. Yeah, somebody is understanding what I'm asking. Can y'all answer that?
Yes, Mark, I had the same question, of course, and contacted Netris, and I was told that ClearCore operation says the property must go into the MLS if you're a member within the 1 business day. However, obviously they don't dictate the status of the listing. So as long as we follow 1 business day, it's in the MLS where everybody can see it, whether it's, you know, active or even, you know, active and then temporarily off the market because something happens, right? All that complies, but the 1 business day is still required in your
Even if-
example of the
even if-
6AB.
Even if
I
you
don't think
check
we're-
6AB. Go ahead, Tim.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't think we're not answering the question he's really asking.
Right.
I mean, because he's talking about not publicly advertising at all. It's just the listing agreement states it. So I'll go back in and read exactly what that says. I don't remember the exact verbiage unless Nancy knows off the top of her head what it is regarding our listing agreement. If it's got a predated date when it goes on the market.
Yeah, Tim, you know what I'm
The rules
asking?
here.
I know what you're asking, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get it figured out.
All right, thanks.
Let's go back. So I jumped ahead to the forms, but let's go through some of these questions just so we have them answered. Again, can you have a seller or the listing broker opt out of the clear cooperation policy? The answer is no. And just keep in mind that the listing or the MLS, the relationship is between the listing broker and the MLS. So the seller is not part of that. That's why it's very important that when you take a listing, and that's why we added language to the listing agreement to help the listing broker explain clear cooperation. But you want to make sure, especially in your fiduciary capacity, that you're explaining to the seller the options for marketing and that you're subject to these additional rules so that they're aware of what they're signing, and that if they absolutely don't want it in the MLS, then they have the option to check, and I'll just fast forward to this one. Number 2 of the listing agreement, that it's not going to be filed with the MLS at all, but there's the note that if the seller or the listing broker decides to publicly market it, again, it's very broad, that it's going to trigger the clear cooperation policy, which will require it to go in the MLS. So a lot to explain, but again, it's part of your fiduciary duty to make sure you are explaining the obligations under the listing agreement. And then we answered this, if the seller publicly markets the property rather than the listing broker, or let's just say it's a third party, is the policy triggered? And NAR has stated yes, it doesn't matter who's publicly marketing it. 8.0 is still going to be triggered. So again, that notice is in the listing agreement. And then it's up to your MLS how they're going to actually enforce that, what the violation would be. We talked about the property types. What about an agent who's selling their own property? So this has brought up a lot of questions. If the agent's selling their own property outside of the brokerage, then 8.0 is not going to apply. 8.0 only applies if there's a listing relationship, a listing agreement. So that question has come up a lot. Just you have to ask those questions. Again, the brokerage may have a policy that anytime the agent or brokerage or broker are listing their own property, what the process is for that. But if there's no brokerage relationship or listing agreement, then 8.0 will not apply. I think we have a question that came in. Okay, someone's answering Mark's question, I believe. And then we touched upon this a little bit, but let me talk more about service area. So if a listing broker is a participant of multiple MLSs, will the listing broker have to submit the listing to both MLSs? And it's going to come down to service area. So don't get this confused with a local board's jurisdiction. That's different, which deals with the counties that the board has. With MLS, they can define the service area very broadly. Netris is probably extremely broad because it's a regional MLS. So if the property is listed within that MLS's service area, then you may have to submit it to multiple MLSs under the Clear Cooperation Policy. So again, that's why it's important to check each MLS you're a participant of. And then compliance, again, just check with NETRIS on their enforcement. As Nancy stated, it's more of an education mode for the rest of the year for your association, but just keep track of that. We already talked about office exclusives. No, it does not prohibit them, but it could trigger it to go into the active status or go into the MLS once it's publicly marketed outside of that sponsoring broker's office. And then forms that need to be used to address Clear Cooperation Policy. I'm not sure if NETRIS has their own forms specific to Clear Cooperation. But again, as we were stating the listing agreement, we did make changes, and earlier this year, was there a comment? Okay, so we did make changes, the task force which Tim did serve on, to the listing agreement and the exclusive agency addendum to the listing. So we kind of went through these, but you can see you have the big notice at the top to warn the seller about what exactly is Clear Cooperation Policy. And this is to protect the listing broker as well, so that they know that the seller knows that even if the seller's the one responsible for public marketing, that's going to trigger 8.0. So you have section 6A1, which is just that's basically the mandatory submission rule that you're going to file it in compliance with the MLS rule. We talked about B, which again should not be checked unless your MLS has a coming soon status, which we know NETRIS does. And then that number 2 is if you're just going to keep it completely off the MLS, this is what you would check. But if it's publicly marketed, then it would have to be submitted to the MLS and then subject to all the other MLS rules. And then the second form that we did amend was the exclusive agency addendum. Just at the bottom, you can see the note to the owner seller that if it's checked but publicly marketed, then they do have to file it within the MLS. So the Clear Cooperation rule is restated there. Just some resources to mention. So you can always check, I think Rebecca mentioned, you can check the minutes and the NAR summary of 2020 MLS changes. NAR does have its list of FAQs up on the website that they're updating as they get more questions. And then we have our own FAQs that relate to specific questions we ask, such as the farm and ranch one, the sponsoring brokerage office exclusive question. And we haven't updated it lately because nothing's really changed. But come November, something else could be proposed, so we'll keep you posted. And then just know that you can always call the Texas Realtors Legal Hotline or me directly. We can answer the question specifically about Clear Cooperation Policy, but when it comes down to the coming soon specifics, that's where we would direct you back to your local MLS, because that is specific to each MLS. And here's my direct information. I do want to warn you, I am having twins soon, so I may be on maternity leave in the next week or two, hopefully 4 weeks. But you can contact me meanwhile at this email address or direct line. Kelly Flanagan is also well-versed in Clear Cooperation Policy, so you can reach out to either one of us. Any questions about the NAR policy? Apologize, I couldn't answer specific questions about NETRIS. Yes, Tim.
I just have a clarification. This is from Cindy Miller, our Chief Operations Officer at NETRIS, that if it is required, if the listing is required to be input, then it does have to be input or does comply with Clear Cooperation. So that includes vacant residential and farm and ranch lots and acreage for sale. So there's
So NETRIS did include farm and ranch.
Essentially everything except commercial is the way it was conveyed to me.
I apologize. I know I tried to get that struck, but I misremembered.
No, you're awesome. You got the answer. Woo!
You got to thank Nancy on that one.
Well, that pretty much concludes my presentation on clear cooperation. If you have any questions, let me know, or feel free to reach me afterwards.
Thank you.
Before you go, I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this point, but
Go on ahead, Mark.
I'm looking at the trigger. I just want to be very clear as a broker, because we need to be clear. The trigger for even putting it as coming soon, to me, is two things. One, a fully executed listing agreement, and the beginning of any public marketing.
And that you actually bring up a good point with the listing agreement, because if there is no listing agreement, 8.0 doesn't even apply.
Right.
So sometimes you may have, obviously we recommend, if you're taking any type of listing, whether you know when it's gonna start or not, even if it's gonna be coming soon or not available, that you have that written authorization in place. The problem is if you don't have the written authorization, 8.0 will not be triggered. However, TREC rules or the Real Estate License Act could come into play, and that could subject you to have your license revoked or removed if you start marketing a property or advertising it without proper authorization. Separate issue, but just wanted to mention that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so listing agreement and public marketing triggers then needing to put it at least as coming soon, or even if you have checked 6AB, if you have the fully executed listing agreement, but you haven't started public marketing and you had a 10-day delay, do you still have to have it as coming soon 1 day after you sign the listing agreement? In other words, is a listing agreement execution the absolute trigger for having it up as coming soon, or does it have to be both a listing agreement and public marketing, and then you can put it as coming soon?
So for 8.0, you have to have the listing agreement and then it publicly marketed.
Okay.
So you have those two components for 8.0. Mandatory submission is just within the certain, I think 72 hours you stated, after you have all necessary signatures. I don't want to quote the coming soon because I don't know the status, what that means for NETRIS.
But the 72-hour is really the 6A1 or 6B1 instead of 6.
Right.
Right. I don't have the, y'all know what I'm
Correct. Right. Yes.
Yes.
I know there's lots of components and aspects to treat. If what you could do, if you want to send me coming I'd prefer it come from NETRIS just because I don't want to give legal advice, but maybe Tim can clarify that from Cindy too, what the coming soon trigger would be and what the status would stay as under coming soon. But coming soon would comply with clear cooperation policy.
If everybody, Brittany posted in the chat what is required as far as the listing agreement, if you're, if it's what it requires when you change the date of when it's actually going on the market.
I'm sorry, my microphone went out again, so I can't, or my speaker. Y'all go ahead. I'm going to quit. My internet's unstable. Sorry. It's frustrating. Live 3 miles off of 380 and I can't even get internet. Pretty bad.
We've got you, Mark.
What's that?
Oh, we can see you and hear you.
It'll go in and out. Yeah, thank you. Anyway, y'all go ahead.
Okay, any other questions for Kinski, Kelly?
Carolyn had one.
Carolyn, thank you.
I have a question. I deal with a lot of people that are, I deal with them by remote. They live out of state or something at the type of properties that I sell. And we were talking about a 72-hour and we were talking about signatures. I wanted to clarify that because I was thinking you said within so many hours after the SIGs, and is that correct?
So I'm quoting, what I'm quoting is the model rule that NAR passes, which says, it would say X amount of hours after all necessary signatures from the seller have been obtained. I'm not sure exactly what Netris's rule, mandatory submission rule says. Does anyone have it handy with regard to that 72-hour rule? So I'm assuming it's similar and says that you would submit it within 72 hours after all the seller's signatures have been obtained.
Executed. Yep, correct.
Now, all right. So in my case, say I have a husband and wife, and maybe they're senior citizens. They don't know how to do DocuSign, or even if they had DocuSign, one of them is on an airplane or somewhere in an area, and I get one signature and I can't get the other. And then on the other side, if it's senior citizens and they have to mail it to me, is it 72 hours from the time I get both signatures or in the mail?
I'm going to take it a step even more complicated. I think it's going to depend on where the property is, because you mentioned out of state, right? And
The
what
buyers are out of state.
okay, but sellers are here. Okay.
Right. And it's 9 times out of 10, it's raw land. Okay.
Okay. And then it's going to depend if it's owned by one of the, let's say the wife owns it outright, not the seller, but in Texas, most likely you're going to have both signatures, and I'm getting into more legal aspects that I'm going to defer to Kelly on, but it's safer to have both the husband and wife signatures, and then you would count the 72 hours.
Okay. Thank you. My situation's different.
Right, without getting into common law versus separate property. Yes.
Thank you.
So in summary, maybe a fully executed listing agreement, right? Whatever would
Correct.
dictate that
Yes.
happening.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Great question. Any other questions, folks? Excellent. Well, again, thank you so very much for clearing the muddy waters, and Jim and Nancy's support, and Brittany as well, digging up all the rules and so forth. We are just so grateful for all of your help and the opportunity to stay out of trouble, right? Okay, next we have our fabulous Vice President, Ms. Tori Glesner. If you will talk to us about our internal operations regarding clear cooperation enforcement beginning January 1, 2021.
So yes, now that everybody is super clear on everything, right?
Got it.
No, but you know what? We will get clear. We're going to get there. We've got a lot of great information. We're all going to work together to make sure we're all on the same page. But with that being said, just to let you know from a board perspective, we are currently working on finalizing the actual enforcement of this. So as Nancy mentioned, we are definitely in a situation where it's education based and trying to get everyone on the same page, and it will continue to be that way until January 1st. On January 1st, our fines will go into place. We cannot speak directly as to what those will be just yet, because we are still trying to work out the most fair procedure for you guys and your agents. But it's basically going to be some type of system where the board is notified of an issue. The board would then reach out to the agent that had the issue. That agent would be formally, given formal notice of the infraction. It would essentially looking like we're going to need to basically give them 1 business day as well to correct that. And then from there, we are going to unfortunately, we're going to have to do those funds. You know, this is what clear cooperation is all about. So, Rebecca, did you have anything to add to that? We're just, you know, all I can say is we're going to continue to keep you guys updated on our process. That way you are fully aware of the best way to protect yourselves and your agent, because, you know, we want to make it really clear before this comes into, let's just call it penalty phase, that everyone knows exactly what those penalties are, because they are going to be steep. Just being very honest with you, we have advisement from NAR and NETRIS, and we're probably looking, and please don't quote me on this, but we are probably looking at a minimum fine of $1,000. So just keep that in the back of your mind for now. So, Rebecca, do you have anything to add to that, or did I pretty much hit that?
I think you nailed it right on the head. And yeah, the underlying ugliness is it has been dictated that our minimum fee, once imposed, must be at least $1,000. So the fine will be at least $1,000. The range was $1,000 to $5,000, and many of the large associations are taking the $5,000 approach. So we're going to go on the light side at this point, I believe, and so it will be a minimum of $1,000, and the second infraction was a minimum of $1,500. So yeah, could be very costly, and so we're in the over-educate and over-communicate with everyone we possibly can, and we'll keep tightening up the communications and get that to everyone as quickly as possible. Right.
Yes.
Great
So,
job, Tori.
yes, Carolyn, do you have any questions?
Yes, would you re-clarify how the board notifies us? Because you said one business day, and how many times they notify us?
Well, Carolyn, that's still something we're working through, because we definitely want to make sure that you guys are getting the proper notification. More than likely, it will go to the agent and that agent's broker. That way, you know, the broker can give an additional push as well, because ultimately their agent, their responsibility, right? So we are going to work really hard. We didn't want to jump into it. We discussed it quite a bit, and we are going to work really hard to make sure that we are giving everybody more than adequate notice, and move forward from there. Because we do want to be fair, because, you know, the reality is sometimes people just, they either don't know or they just kind of goof up. I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes. I know we don't want to admit that, but we do. But the purpose here is not to be punitive, and that's partially why I mean, like they said, some boards are going into fines already, and we as a board have chosen to hold off until January. And I think there's still more education to do, and we will definitely make sure that everything is lined out perfectly for you guys, or as perfectly as can be for you to enforce and help us enforce.
And I appreciate that. I guess since I'm not glued to the computer 24/7, and I may be out and busy showing or whatever, and come in and tired and don't look at the computer, I want to be sure I don't miss that notification. Is it by email? Do I get a phone call?
You know, it's probably going to be a combination of things. Again, we haven't fully decided, but I would say at this point, it's not just going to be one method of communication. It's going to be multiple methods of communication, whether it be a phone call, email, mail. We're going to make sure that we've got it going for everybody. So anyway, any other questions? We'll keep you guys informed, but just know we're working hard for you.
Great job. Thank you, Tori.
Thank you.
We will keep the information coming forth. Next, let's welcome our esteemed Regional Vice President of Texas Realtors, Tim Schoendorf, if you'll share your updates with us.
Hey, everybody again. Okay, I'll do matrix or NETRIS first, and then we'll do a little bit of RVP stuff. Okay, first off, tomorrow night at 10 p.m., your realist tax will be under maintenance, so it will be hit and miss whether or not you'll be able to pull up your tax information. They're working on it from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and they should have it resolved, but it'll just, most likely you won't even know it. Next was, there's going to be some training on the new cloud, the cloud CMAs and all that kind of stuff. You know, now you can actually do a listing presentation through cloud and contact Zoom or another portal and do a virtual listing presentation. And there'll be some training coming up on that. And Matrix 10 is the exciting thing that we're working on. Matrix X. Yes, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, it's Matrix X, not 10. It is going to be a new user interface for our Matrix, which is going to simplify and make it look more user-friendly. And following that will launch on August 24th. Now, there'll be some updates going out regarding, because certain browsers won't work well with the new Matrix X. So look for information. You may have to update your browser in order to get the best benefit out of using Matrix X. And then it won't roll out immediately, but there's a new exciting feature that's going to roll out as well. And I just went blank on the name. But it's regarding the One Home. I'm sorry, One Home is going to be the new version of the agent or the customer portal. And it'll look very sleek, very modern. It's going to be on a new platform. So if your clients are used to searching on Zillow or one of those other things, it's going to look even better than what they're seeing there. So look for that to launch later on in the year. And there are also some updates going out regarding the new home search portal that's there. So if you're doing business, a lot of new construction, there'll be some training coming up on how to use their services to the best of your agent's advantage. And I think that covers all of my Netris. Is that correct, Nancy? Okay. And then I'll jump over to the 100th anniversary conference we have coming up August 31st. As Rebecca was saying, it is going to be super exciting, especially being virtual. It's great to be in person, but the fact that we're virtual, we're going to probably blow the attendance out the door. And we will have our regional caucus meetings where basically you get an update of everything going on in our region from your regional vice presidents. And it's a great time to give input to us and allows us to take information back to the executive board at Texas Realtor. So with that, I'll conclude my report.
Great job. Any questions for Tim? Great. Well, thank you very much. Moving to MLS, Miss Brittany.
Hi there. I'm going to share my screen and get right into it. Okay, so we added some new resources to the MLS page. You can get there by going to Benefits, clicking MLS, and then it will bring you here. So down here we have resources for new agents or current agents, the MLS status glossary, days on market calculations, status flags on search results, media purging policy, and we have our clear cooperation video here, and realist videos like how to get started with that, and then the transaction desk learning tools, formerly known as Instanet, just some self-led tutorials. And just to give you an idea of what it would look like, this is where it would take you, and then the actual dashboard, transaction desk, and then it will have this, and that'll let you know that you're in the right system. And the same for zip forms. This is what it would look like. Zip Form Plus, and it even says we've changed the names. And they have their little icon there. And also, I added request an office visit. And you would fill out this form to have the visit one-on-one with me. It's now virtual. And we need at least 2 weeks in advance so I can kind of build the class and tailor it to your needs. It's usually an hour. And we also have a number of attendees here, because we have to have at least most of the office or some of the office. If you have an office of 3, then we can do 3, but we'll talk more about it when I call after you submit the form for confirmation. And that's it for me.
Great. Any questions for Brittany? Wonderful job. Well, let's all utilize that. Come to my office and help my people, right? Get that one done. I'm all over that. Great. We sure appreciate all your hard work and jumping in, running at full speed, girl. Welcome. We're a handful. At least we know it. Thank you. Okay, moving right along, we have Nancy going to share some association executive updates, please.
Okay, we have two other points we want to get to you today, but just going back to Brittany's virtual office visit, when we do get to go out, we're still going to have that available. So please keep that in mind. And she's got, I think, 5 or 6 different class options there, so you can kind of mix and match if you want to, Matrix, RPR, or Zip Forms, or whatever it is. There's a whole scroll of things that are available to you. You just tell her what you need and she'll tailor it to you. So I just wanted to make sure you had that. Okay, so 2 things. One, before I get to the MLS procedures, I want to take a dip over to Code of Ethics. Ashley will be sending out an email to all the brokers and managers regarding Code of Ethics. Remember, this year, we've transitioned into a 3-year program. It ends December 31st, 2021, correct? We have through 2021. So if you're interested in obtaining a list of the agents within your office, you respond to the email she's sending out. She'll get you the list and the different opportunities where you can get that handled so that everybody's up to date. We don't get to the end of 2021 and go, wow, we didn't know we needed this. So anyway, watch for that email from Ashley at GDWCAR.com, please. And the last thing that I have is basically, as Brittany's taken over MLS and really doing a fabulous job, we've made some adjustments there and best practices for handling all things coming in. We've always had the rules and regulations, which can be found on our website. But in addition to that, we actually have a more clear set of guidelines for the staff as a whole to process everything in the same manner. So we're looking for, and always have been, supporting documentation. That is pretty much for your protection. We don't want to do anything that's out of our scope here. Remember, we don't do any legal advice here. So we are making sure all canceled listings are being returned to the brokers. If an agent sends in a submission, sometimes we get phone calls, folks. Please let your agents know that we can't do anything over the phone. It all has to be in writing, every request, and then it'll be responded to with whatever that guideline might be, and whether that's a listing transfer. Again, we don't handle canceled listings, so we're going to, point them right back to you. You might have date changes. You might have updates, price changes. We get a lot of seller agent changes, but just procedures for handling all those. Again, we do everything based off of paper and can't handle it through the phone. So please encourage them to, send it to Brittany. It's MLS at GDWCAR.com, and she will handle it. And the beauty of this is that in her absence, any of the staff can pretty much pick up and kind of move on from here. So you can look this. So we're going to actually put it in the MLS on the website there with the MLS stuff. So if you're needing just to, somebody wants to know how do we do that, then you can probably find it there, or certainly call the office and we'll point you in the right direction. But again, we need paper, and that might be the listing agreement. Anything we do needs a request. And then Some of them obviously need approval from the broker, such as transferring listings, which we learned about from Kelly Flanagan earlier. So please look those things over. If you have any questions, give myself a call or Brittany, and we'd be happy to help you get whatever you need done. Thank you. That concludes it.
Excellent. Thank you, Nancy. And to add a suggestion for our ethics requirement from the National Association of Realtors, the C2EX Commitment to Excellence training program is located on the NAR website free of charge, and that will cover the ethics requirement. And I did that one not long ago and was pleasantly surprised. It's really a good, strong program. So I would suggest that as a possibility to fulfill ethics requirements for your folks and get some great training through, again, the NAR website, C2EX program. Really a good one. With that, do we have any other questions, information, anything? Well,
I
we
would
have,
like to add something if
yes,
I could.
go right ahead, Brittany.
Okay, so with the agent not having access, once they transfer to a new office, I don't know if you guys know, I'm sure you know more than me, but when they transfer, they don't have access to their listing anymore, and then it's the responsibility of the listing broker to close it out, because I know some of them send me the information and say close it out. How do you guys feel about that? Do you want me to go ahead and close it out, or listing broker? Nancy?
That needs to go back to the broker. Yes.
Agreed here. Any input? Okay.
That goes back to the broker. That's not your job, Brittany.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions, clarifications? I think we worked through a lot of the mud this morning. Got lots of wonderful information. We're so thankful for all of you again for being here, sharing your awesome questions. Let us know how to continue to help, and be well. Have a beautiful weekend. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.